How are the bladders? I will be short. My dad, in 1934 on October 22nd, my dad was pulled out of school. He was 14 years old. That wasn't uncommon in those days, particularly if you were the son of a farmer. A year and a half later, he was sent to a little place called Oaklands in New South Wales, where he was put to work with his uncle Kevin Rook, who had a stock and station agency. Now, Uncle Kevin used to spend most of his business in the local pub, which was just next door to the office, so my dad, over the 5 years that he worked for him, really ran the business. It got to 1939, 1940, and by this stage Dad had had 5 years in the business and wanted a way out. But he didn't want to disappoint his mother, his uncle, his extended family, who all thought that he would make a great stock and station agent. So he put his thoughts together and said, how am I going to get out of this? I know, I'll go to war. So off he did, and he finished up in the 6th Division, but that was a sliding door moment. When they were sent to training in Albury, he got the measles and was sent home for 3 weeks. And when they got back, all the units there had been divided into either the 6th Division or the 8th Division. And Dad had mates in both and found that he was on both divisions. He chose the 6th, and throughout his life he was grateful for that decision, because otherwise he might have been a prisoner of the Japanese, and he always felt that he came off better by going to Greece. He arrived in Greece, as the photograph earlier showed, and had that 1 day of leave. And in the morning he went to that fountain, and a photographer came up and said, Mr. Byrne, or no, sorry, he wouldn't have said that at all. He would have said, mate, I'll take your photograph and come back at 4 o'clock and you can pick it up. So Dad did the deal. I don't know how many drachma it would have been, but it wouldn't have been much, I guess. But he came back at 4 o'clock in a heck of a hurry, because he had received orders that they were to pull out of Athens and head for Kalamata. And he was a truck driver, and he had to pick up supplies and personnel along the way. So, but he did find time to go back to the fountain, and sure enough, the photographer was there and handed over the photo that you saw today. My father's war was very brief. It was a matter of days, not weeks or years. He was a truck driver. He wasn't an infantier, but he did his job with pride. And when they were caught at Kalamata, he recalled things like, for example, they had to be deloused, and the men were told to strip off and march as a unit down to where the fumigation station was, with the embarrassment of being marched down the street nude. It was one of the most shameful days in his life. You could see his eyes welling up when he spoke about it. And yet he said that despite this, there were people, Greek people, along the side of the road who would come out and give them a hard-boiled egg or a little pouch of goat's milk, and take those risks of getting beaten over the head with a rifle butt. And that didn't happen once. It happened at Corinth, and it happened at Salonika. As a consequence, my father developed a great respect and admiration for the Greek people. He had a job as a truck driver when he came home from the war with Peter's Ice Cream. And one of his customers was a fellow called Georgi Aloysius, who had a Greek cafe in Bright. George couldn't have been a very important Greek. He only had 8 letters in his name. So. but he was important to my dad, and he caused Dad to be late home from so Dad was based in Shepparton in those days, I should have said. So it was a 3-day run in the ice cream truck, and he would always be late home and would give the excuse that George held him up. I got to know George as a young teenager, and whenever we walked into that cafe, we could expect to at least have 2 meals before we went back to Wangaratta, which by then where we were living. In his later years, My mother died in the year 2000 and Dad died in 2006. But in those 6 years, he would often find his way down to the Glen, the big shopping centre in the east of Melbourne. And he would walk around and he would he was a very personable man, by the way, a very intelligent man, even though he only had a few years of education. He would look for people to talk to. And if he could find a Greek, that made his day. And if the Greek came from Kalamata, that made his year. So I'd like to finish on that note, that although war does bring back terrible memories, I served in Vietnam myself, and I know what they went through. And I just thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you, Jim, and let's be together.